If you are a victim of domestic violence or partner violence, please call your local police department or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone. There are resources available to help you and your family. Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Lydia Cassady, Part 2.
So it was like we'd come up with the option of, okay, you got to either do this, go down under kind of world, almost like with the Greenhouse 17,
yes.
You kind of go off the radar, the grid, or, you got to get a plan to get out and start that plan. So she decided to go down that route,
Make sure when we, because we won't hit it right now, but when we get ready to finish up, I do want to talk about things that you're involved in the wake of this death, and let's make sure we talk about Greenhouse 17.
Oh, absolutely.
We won't do it right now. But
no, it's fine.
Fantastic people.
Oh, my God.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Can't say enough about that organization.
So the people need to keep listening to understand what that's all about.
Absolutely.
But what a great thing to drop.
So moving forward, years down the road, you all just kind of go along to get along with him.
Yep.
And then years pass.
Yep.
What was the pivotal moment where you all said, you can't keep doing this no more?
Yeah. Well, and I think, throughout the years, any kind of events that we're big entertainers. We love to have people in our home. Every year we throw a big Christmas party, all that kind of stuff. And just people realize, once you're around him for any length of time, you realize, there's something just not right, like something, And I think as that went along, I think probably the most pivotal point was October of 21, which would be when my stepfather passed away. And he got really sick with liver cancer and he died. And when he died, he had left Lydia some things and some money. Not a whole lot, but enough for her to know that she could do some things to kind of get out of this. And so when he was really sick and he started to die, and when he died, I said, because I was took care of all of his estate and his will and stuff. And I said, look, I always called him Daddy Rush. I'm like, Daddy Rush couldn't stand him either. And, you've got some decisions to make here now. You have the means, because that was one of the big control factors is she never had the means ever. And, she had support and we always offered different things, but, she never had the means to actually go and take her kids and make it happen. And so when he passed, as soon as he passed, even at the funeral, these are some of the things that you just, he's in the casket. My sister and her at the front of the casket, just like you do as you greet the folks that are at the visitation. He's trying to determine who's getting what within the house. And I told Lydia when he died, I said, look, I'm not messing with him. You and I will sit down and we will determine what happens without him, without his input. And you will make a decision and I will make a decision. He has literally, he was at the casket talking about TVs and things within the home. And, and it was the first glimmer of her being furious with him that I had seen. Because literally she said, because I said, now's not the place to talk about this to him. And he kept on, and he just kept on. And she finally said something like, now these are my words, not hers, but it was something similar, like enough already.
Yeah.
But it was the tone she took. And I was like, who's this? Because this person had never shown up.
And he probably thought, who's this?
And I was like, okay. So But when that happened, he quickly went into mode of kind of the narcissist of, okay, I'm going to buy some land. I'm going to, I've been looking around and I'm going to get this and I'm going to do this. And I, with all of her dad's money, and again, not that much. And,
I think we just got past uncouth for
Yeah.
Daryl. I think we just got past uncouth.
Yeah.
We did. And, and I mean, even Daryl was like, oh my gosh, it's just nuts. And, and I said to her, I said, I hope your ears are open and you're hearing what is happening here. Because I mean, it was almost like a video you were watching and you were just like, and I think like she really was picking up on it now. Like, I mean, I think she knew it all along, but I think that
opened her eyes.
This was the point of, well, I'm not, I mean, you could just tell her whole confidence level changed and her whole attitude changed towards him at that point.
Well, it's so rude. First of all, you're at a funeral. Who does that? The man's not even in the ground yet. God rest his soul. But it's not your money to spend.
And
it's
the emotional pain that she's going through.
Yeah. How about the fact that she just lost her dad?
Exactly.
And you're trying to spend the money that's not even yours?
Yeah.
How dare you? That's awful.
Yeah. And so, again, that was happening. And I think that was my first view of her getting a little bit of oomph behind her. Like, enough. And again, those are my words, not hers at the time, but it was something to that effect, like shut up kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like enough about that here. This is not the place. And so that was kind of the first piece, glimmer. And so Rush was buried, or not buried, but we did Rush's services. He was cremated. And then, obviously worked through all of his home and his belongings. And so it was, of course, he wanted to kind of keep at that kind of stuff. And, I don't know how many times I had to tell Lydia, I'm like, look, I'm not dealing with him. I'm not doing it. So, her and I had to have several conversations without him, which is really awkward, because most of the time you can't get her without him, unless she was at work. You call her on the phone. But I think after that, what really changed the tune was, I think he realized after he was doing all the and she basically like, I'm going to buy some place in Eastern Kentucky. And she's basically going, I'm not moving away from my sister and Daryl. I'm not moving away from him. And I mean, and she started to get more confident in that of, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not buying land. I don't want to do that. And he kept with that. And then I think that kind of went on, and November came around, and I would say the next time there was kind of a big piece was right around Thanksgiving. In fact, on Thanksgiving, he walks in and we're cooking or whatever, and everybody's kind of eating, and you know how everybody kind of mellows out after Thanksgiving. And I remember him walking to go get a drink, which is in my mud room, another room, but it's right there off the kitchen. And he said, "Hey, Carolyn, did your sister tell you that she said she wasn't going to marry me? I asked her to marry me, and she said no." And that's when he walked around the thing into the mudroom, and she then says something, and I again can't remember exact words, but she was like, "No, I'm not marrying you," or something like that, really cocky and confident. And I remember him whipping back around the corner, and that was the first that I'd kind of seen him, and he goes, "What'd you just say?" And so there was this like really heated,
awkward moment for
moment.
You standing there observing it. I bet Daryl was just like,
well, and I don't even know.
I
don't know that, because I feel like they were doing something out in the garage or they were out on the porch. I don't even know that Daryl was like right there. I remember me being in the kitchen and her sitting at the table and him walking around that mudroom to get the drink, and him coming back going, "What did you just say?" And so, I kind of was like, okay, uncomfortable,
yes, awkward.
Yeah. And so from there on, it became very weird at that point.
Did the afternoon at Thanksgiving, did it kind of mellow out?
It was okay.
It just kind of fizzled.
Yep, it was okay. But I think at that point she realized the only reason he'd be asking me to marry me
is to get that money.
To get this money.
Yes.
Oh, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
If you're going to stand next to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been with him nearly 20 years and you haven't asked yet, some people took 5 years, but I'd have never stuck around for 20.
No rush jobs here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was kind of that turning point.
Did you ask her after, like, tomorrow or the next day? Were you like, what was that all about?
Well, and that's when she said, well, yeah, he did ask me to marry him, and I told him no, and I'm not marrying him. And I mean, she would get kind of her attitude with me that's a little different than it was with him.
Yes.
And she's just like, I'm not marrying him. And I said, well, it's a good thing, because that's all he's after is your money. I mean, you sat there for a month and listened to him, how he's going to do all the things with his money.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like, this is just crazy. It's just crazy.
So you get through Thanksgiving and then Christmas. Any incidents at Christmas, or did you have them back?
Yeah, well, I would say the last 2 weeks prior to, probably 3 weeks prior to her death, things were very, I don't know. I would just call them creepy, crazy. I don't even know all the things that you would call them. You know, the kids are out 2 weeks right there at Christmas time. She had gotten a job and had been working as kind of a medical assistant kind of person, like a CMNA, I think is what it's called, for a dermatologist's office with the clinic. And loved this job, had done her schooling, did really well. First real job in kind of the real world of, you know, going in at a certain time, being held accountable to come home at a certain time. You know, you can't be on the phone with Ken 19 times during the day. You had pharmaceutical reps coming in and saying, hey, we're taking the doctor's office and the nurses out to dinner. And he was absolutely not. And if she did, it was kind of the wrath, you know, that's not okay. Why aren't they taking me out? You know, it was all about him.
Yeah.
It's like, it has nothing to do with you.
Well, and he's probably realizing she's somebody now.
Yeah.
She's important in this role.
Yep.
She doesn't just have to sit and wait for me to come home to heat my dinner up.
Yep. And she was, you know, kind of making a way for herself in this role. She really liked it. She'd made some really close friends within the doctor's office that kind of knew what was going on. You know, just a lot of things there. She had, through the clinic, she had a really small, you know, kind of life insurance thing. And 2 weeks prior to her death, she had changed her life insurance policy from Ken to the children.
Wow.
Yeah. And so those 2 weeks prior, 2 to 3 weeks prior to her death, she really wanted a brand new truck. She never had a brand new truck. She'd always had like used vehicles. In fact, this is just another one of those kind of ego things, is he'd actually supposedly bought her a used truck that was actually pretty good. And then he had kind of this old SUV, and he bought her this truck. And it's like, you know, and then of course when he come around, he'd tout, well, I bought your sister this new truck and and, you know, and then I forget what happened. She did something wrong. She didn't do something right. And he basically took the truck away from her and gave her the piece of crap
SUV
vehicle, so that, you know, it didn't work right. You had to push the gas and the brake at the same. I mean, it's weird stuff, like just not good. But it was stuff like that he would do
to punish her.
And so those last few weeks, one day we had taken my niece to see a movie, and I guess during this time she had pretty much told him right after Thanksgiving, I don't want to be with you anymore. I want to leave. I want to, you know, not really divorce because they're not married, but I want to leave, take the kids. We're going to get our own place. You can even have a key to the house. I mean, you can still be part of the family kind of thing, but it's just not good. Like, we need to go our separate ways. And so I think that all then started kind of all this stuff. In between there too, I think, you know, she was just done with him. And, you know, I think at one point, you know, she had like, I'm just done with him. Like, he's going to be done. And, you know, I think at one point, you know, she had, of course, you know, everybody's on social media and the TikToks and whatever. So I think she had started like having a conversation with another gentleman. And I think at one point he had seen some of this conversation. And I think he, that put him over the top too.
Because now he's really losing control.
She's
got a job and she's wanting to get a place to live.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm not going to marry you. I want out of this relationship. Now I'm looking for another relationship. So one thing that kind of, for me, it's like, and I remember me even having a conversation with her because I felt like she was getting really confident and cocky. And I'm like, please tell me there's not somebody else. Like, you don't he's crazy. We don't need any other crazies, And, my husband was like, she can't be leading him on, because I think for her, it was, let me try to get out. Let me do all the right things or try to do the right things. She'd gone to the Jessamine County domestic violence folks there. She had gone to the school where the children were at, talked with the officer there as well as the principal. She had started packing up crates and totes and bringing them to a place so she could store them. And she, done like 2 truckloads of that. And she had started getting all the kids' stuff together, like making sure she was real organized. I think that's why she went and changed her policy, at the time. And I think she started doing all of this. And then I think at one point, I think he realized that she was trying to move some stuff because I think he either called her out or something like that. Because I remember my nephew saying something about he saw that there was stuff in the back of the truck and it was like, what's that? And, and there's this big kind of heated argument. So I think she was trying to do all that stuff. But right around that time, we had brought my niece to see a movie and we were bringing her back home. And I remember him coming out to my side of the window and, just kind of hanging out. And so he is, she's going to give me another chance. She's going to give me another chance. We're getting back together. We are back together. I've done some bad things and I've done some wrong things, but we're back together and, all this kind of stuff. And I mean, it was so bizarre, one, because most men don't have those kind of conversations with another man. Like my husband's right there in the driver's seat. Yeah. It was very awkward and weird. Like it was one of those moments that, we both left out of there and went, what was that?
Happened?
What was that?
And who was that for?
Yeah.
That's what I would be wondering.
Yeah.
Is who was that for?
I've done some things and, all this kind of stuff, but she's forgiven me and we're going to get back together and da-da-da-da-da. Now, lead up, if you kind of reverse a little bit too, from what we understand, he always had someone else. Always.
I was going to go because there's a name that shows up in the news articles, mm-hmm. and but I think it's
Shirley Shoemaker.
Exactly. Because when you talk about I've done some bad things, let's go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot about her at all. I have never physically met her. What my husband and I knew of her was she is this little old woman that he is helping out. That's what we were told. I go there and I help her out.
So now, you're thinking she's 87 and she's a widow and feeble.
Yeah, I'm thinking she's some little old lady, right? Or weird. And now I think for both my husband and I, we're both like, this doesn't, he doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, that's not in his nature to help. Yes.
Right? Unless there's gain, he's not doing a bunch of help. And so I think for him, I think it was, from what we understand, there was a lot of other women besides Lydia and besides the Shirley, but I think for the last 4 years of the life, she was there and she was
4 years. He had a relationship with this lady.
And I think the relationship started out and her husband was there not involved in the relationship, but he was there in the picture. So I don't know if he met them and befriended them at first, but soon the husband's out of the house. Ken has a room in this house. In fact, when you read stuff on people's text messages, which of course, her phone, I read 4 years of text messages, between the two. At one point he's taken pictures of his bedroom to show Lydia. And it's just, some of it was just so
So sick. Lydia knew of Shirley.
Lydia knew of
and
Shirley.
knew that he stayed there.
And again, we're not trying to make any kind of a judgment on Shirley, but when I saw her name in the news, I thought, well, let's put some context to it, because actually I don't know who she is either, but I don't want to frame her up in a way.
Right.
Then the news kind of leaves some innuendo in there, and I thought, well, we could probably help her out a little bit too, because she's obviously associated with this bad cat.
Yep.
And,
So yeah, you
thank
naturally
God
assume that she's bad as well, which may not be the case. She
probably
might have
not.
Yeah.
been his
And
next victim if he had stuck
That's
around
it.
long enough.
Yeah.
That's it.
So
Well, and I
Lydia
think-
knew.
Yep. Lydia knew. And I think from what we understand, and again, this information wasn't privy to us until after she was murdered. Lydia was murdered. Was that Shirley thought that Lydia was Ken's niece. So Ken lived with Lydia, Ken's niece, and his 2 children.
Wow.
So that was the storyline that was according to
Now,
what we found out.
Had you ever heard the name Shirley during these 4 years?
We had heard the name Shirley as, hey, going to help the little old lady Shirley up in Frankfurt fix her fence. Hey, he's up at Shirley's tonight. And I mean, I'm like, what? And I mean, even again, talking to Lydia on especially those last 2 or 3 months, it's like, what in the world is happening here? Like, he's up there, I mean, it's just so
like, why would he
strange.
be staying there? Even if it was an elderly lady that he's helping, you don't just stay there.
Yeah.
Frankfurt is not that far from us. It's not like you're traveling 3 hours and it's too late to come back home. Did anybody ever find out was she an old lady? Is this a truly old feeble lady?
No. I want to say she, and I don't know what the news report, but I would say she's late 50s, early 60s.
Wow.
The news reports I'm talking about, because again, I still want to stay clear on this, is that we're going to get to a point where he's can't be located.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's with him. But again, maybe to do her a solid as far as take the innuendo out, because clearly she's a victim of his manipulative ways.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's got a niece now. I mean, it deep dives into who he is.
Right.
Yeah.
So you all have kind of heard this name for the last 4 years. Just
and really not. I don't know that it was for the last 4 years. I think it was for the last 2 or 3 years. Like that first 1 or 2 years, I don't know that we really heard her name a whole lot.
Yeah.
You would hear it. I would say probably the last 2 years of Lydia's life, we heard it a lot just on the weekends. Like when Lydia was with us, we'd ask, what's Ken doing? Oh, he's over at Shirley's. They're fixing a fence, or, they'd have my nephew over there with her fixing, doing stuff or fixing her floor, or just something that was happening, to supposedly help her out.
A good Samaritan.
Yeah.
So do you think Lydia's suspicion that this was a girlfriend, or do you think she thought he's truly helping this old lady?
I think Lydia knew. What this was. I also think that she was funding Ken, this woman, So, again, I don't know that to be true. All I know is in records that I reviewed after Lydia's passing had Shirley's credit card information and things like that. So I don't know if there was some, again, maybe that was because he did some jobs for him. I don't know. It's just odd.
Had Lydia and Shirley ever met?
Yes.
Do you know the circumstances of that?
I think they'd met a few times. I think the way they met, though, that was his niece.
And Lydia knew that she was niece?
Yeah.
And she was okay being the niece?
I think she was okay being the niece because that put him out of the house 2 or 3 nights a week, and that was a good thing.
Wow. Do you think Shirley truly knew that she wasn't a niece?
I don't know. I'd be hard-pressed to say that she didn't.
You have an adult
odd.
niece. Why isn't she living on her own? That's weird. Where's her dad, your brother, or your sister, whomever?
Yeah. So
we've got Shirley, who's the other person, and so it's common that he's gone each week, at least a night or 2 or 3 or 4 to Shirley's, and Lydia's okay because at least he's out of her hair.
Yep.
And the kids kind of know probably a little bit that this is kind of a weird situation, but
with them.
The children did Lydia come along as well? Okay. So the children vacationed with Ken and Lydia. I'm sorry, with Ken and Shirley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Lydia was okay with that? Like she would tell you the children are gone with
I don't know
Shirley?
that the word okay is the right word. I think it was
I'm taking the kids with me and Shirley.
Yeah, I think it is. It's his way.
Wow.
There's no option. Right.
Like I said, it speaks to the depth of who this guy
Yes.
was. Speaks to
so moving into this night, this happened on January 5th. Had you talked to her on like the 3rd or 4th?
So it actually happened the night of the 4th. The reason it shows
Okay.
the 5th is because that's when the coroner got to and I'm not sure how that works, but I'm sure you
when
know
they make an official
yeah,
call.
when
Yeah.
they make the official call.
Mhm.
And again, there was some, again, what we said, kind of some real oddities kind of things happening. And so the last time we saw Lydia was on the 31st. So she talked about wanting a nice new truck.
Mhm.
And I was like, perfect. Daryl and I'll get you in contact with our car guy because we've bought a few cars from a dealership. You know, we'll get you helped out and all that kind of stuff. And so on Saturday, I think it was Saturday, on the 31st, she texted and said, you know, hey, are you home? We're just out for a drive. We wanted to come see you. And I said, yeah. I said, we're taking down Christmas decorations. Just pop by. It's fine. And so she came by to show me her new truck.
Was she by herself?
No, she was with him and the kids. And so they had gone and gotten this new truck with her, you know, dad's money. And he co-signed for it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
what is
why
happening?
is his name on there?
And so, of course, his whole thing when he came in is like, well, yeah, I got your sister this truck. And
no, actually her dad did.
yeah,
okay.
exactly. And so, but I mean, you know, it was this big show. And then at one point, I guess he's having a sidebar conversation with my husband that said, I'm thinking of, if Lydia agrees to marry me, are you okay if we get married here at the house, at the barn? And, so he's having this whole conversation. So this is all happening this evening. It's really odd, so, hey, she goes and gets this truck and he co-signs for it. I'm like, what the? And so she's so proud of this truck, it's beautiful. And, he's going on about how he got this truck. And then he's having a sidebar conversation with Daryl about how they're going to get married in our barn. And so we're sitting there and I said, well, have you all had anything to eat? You want to run up to the little diner and we'll get something to eat. And so we went to the little diner there in Stamping Ground and had dinner. And it was all of us. The kids were there and everything. And and this was that other kind of creepy, crazy, the whole conversation was almost like how he had been abused as a child. And how his daddy was so awful and how he would, throw himself over his mom. He had many broken ribs because his dad would beat his mother and he would throw himself over his mother to kind of protect her, and how evil his father was and all this kind of, he's kind of just talking about how, oh, woe is me.
Yeah, how bad he had it.
Yeah, how bad it was and how awful. And and so the whole night was kind of that conversation.
Just weird. Like, why are we even talking about this?
Very weird. And I just, Lydia and I always, which was just a big thing, and it's always for my whole family, is, when we say our goodbyes, it's hugs and kisses and I love you. And, it was one of those things that you look back at, and when she walked out that door and we did that, it was just like one of those things that you go, that was kind of an eerie, remembrance of, that's the last time I saw her.
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.